Hear me now? Oh my God, amazing. Let's start over then. Sorry, guys. Um, Good morning. If anybody did take watched market prep yesterday, and marked out some levels with us, we ended up having our gray box level from 32 to 29 play very, very well. Um, we were able to get about 30 or 40 points out of that after a tap of the top of our average range. So that was a fantastic play, fantastic read on the market. We've had a little bit of a bullish uh, extended trading hours session, which does look good mechanically. Our charts have actually played pretty well. We had a lot of consolidation in ETH. Let me move this actually over towards ETH a little bit more. We had a little bit of consolidation in ETH throughout Yellow Box, but we did get our break above, a retest, and our tap of average range to kind of continue to the upside. And so that is really, really good to see, actually. Um, I do want to find some levels. I was just looking to at our news to see if we had any sort of like data or anything, any private data that was coming through. We don't. Today's pretty quiet. We have a couple of Fed speakers that are coming through, but those guys usually don't really tend to move the market. But one of the things that I was thinking about is the House is going to be voting um, on passing that continuing resolution bill that the Senate ended up pushing through this afternoon. I'm not exactly sure what time they're pushing that. They're going for the vote, but I'm imagining that's probably going to be um, pretty good for the market because a lot of that money that otherwise would have been injected into the market from a federal funding perspective has been kind of on hold. So we should see some pretty increased liquidity like once we do get that continuing resolution passed. So I'll be keeping a close eye on that just to kind of see how that does impact the market and if we see any tape bombs upon approval of the bill or if it's just going to be like business as usual. I'm truly not sure. So I'm just going to be a little bit cautious for that, knowing that we do have that vote this afternoon. So let's go look at some levels and see how we're doing today on this bullish morning. Okay, let's pop open fractals. Okay, so we are back on the Wave One Daily, and um, been on the move up. We've pretty much had 4 days in a row of bullish activity. We had our little bit of consolidation after that last run up about 2 weeks ago, kind of back at that same spot that we were actually looking at even 2 weeks ago. So I just want to hop into Options Analyzer real quick because we're currently creating that H4, which means four green days, one after the other. So I just want to hop into Options Analyzers to see what actually the odds are of going to an H4, going to an H5, et cetera, and essentially continuing this bullish trend. And so, as you can kind of see, like going from a one to a three, like we had a pretty decent odds of like getting there. It's honestly still pretty decent for going into like an H4. Um, we've had three H4s in the past 250 days, past 200 days. Going into the 5, 6 to 9 is like a little bit less. So I wouldn't really be too heavy on options analyzer and being like, oh, like there's a super, super low odds of an H4. Like I do think there is still a little bit of a potential to the upside. We're currently trading at the 20% odds of continuation on the wave one daily, which essentially means, right, if we hit this area, there is a 20% odds, a 20% chance of us moving higher than this zone. So it's actually a pretty great area just in terms of what I would probably consider high probability rejection, but I am tracking this open state at 69.5560. This was the open state that we did create a few weeks ago from that pretty large run up. And so 69.55 is still pretty high, but I do want to start looking at it to kind of understand if we do get there, will that be an opportunity for rejection? Because the other thing I do just want to note on the Wave 1 daily is that if you look really closely at this, we had a lot of resistance kind of moving up through the 80%, 50%, 20% odds with these little black clusters that we're seeing. After the 20% odds, we have a pretty decent amount of float to the upside here. We don't see any resistive clusters over here really until we get to, around 69.47 to 69.55. So we're going to obviously go look at our lower time frames, but the Wave 1 daily does have some room to the upside. So that does give me some confidence for continued bullish momentum. But let's go look at some of our smaller time frames to see if we have any opportunity. The other thing I do want to note on the Wave 1 daily is that our pivot is at 68.94, or sorry, our vector, our purple vector line is at 68.9450 this morning. We're trading at around 68.95, so we are seeing vector as supportive on the Wave 1 daily currently. Um, let's go hop into the 7 wave 60 to see if vector has actually been respected throughout our extended trading hours. So we're looking at a little bit of a smaller time frame here. But similar to the Wave 1 daily, on the 7 Wave 60, we are also up at the 20% odds. But see, you can even see right as we get into um, those smaller time frames, like we do see a little bit more opportunity for resistance between like 68.94, 69.22. It's not a lot compared to like what we see really, really close to pivot, but there is still like a little bit of resistance. The one thing I want to note here, though, on the 7 wave 60 is we don't have any open states until we come all the way back to what we created here. This was about 2 days ago. So 19 periods ago or 2 days ago, we ended up making an open state that is now tracking at 69.8803. We're trading at 68.91. So that next open state is basically 100 points away. We obviously have this open state here that we recently created at 6,900. And if we look, that's just the high that we created this morning. And so I'm not going to probably spend too much time paying attention to those super, super recent open states just because we're still seeing vector as supportive. And the recency of that doesn't really make it super significant for me. So we are at those 20% odds though on the 7 wave 60, which does give us a little bit of confidence for rejection potential because we only have a 20% chance of continuing higher. But what I really, really want to be looking for is on like our 10 wave or a 20 wave 15-minute or 7 wave 5-minute, some type of density of open states so we can look for a high probability rejection. Okay, let's go look at our 20 wave. Okay, so here we go. Here's a new story. So the 20 by 15 is actually straddling their pivot right now, which makes sense, right? Because we had a pretty bullish move in extended trading hours, and you could probably argue we've been consolidating quite a bit ever since this like actual break above our average range. Let's see, this was at basically midnight. We've been in a pretty tight range between what I would argue like 85 to 99. It's a decent range. Um, so now that we're looking at our smaller time frames, we're kind of seeing that consolidation and that revision on our vector, and then that revision back close to pivot. We even moved below pivot briefly at one point. The one thing I want to note though, I just really want to zoom in on this vector real quick to see if we've actually been respecting it. And it kind of looks like we've been respecting it. When we had that revision back below pivot, we did break below vector, but then we quickly broke right back above it, saw it as supportive, and are continuing to see that vector be supportive as we sit above pivot here. So interesting to see. But similar story on the 20 by 15. Our nearest open state beyond the one that we have most recently created, right, just a couple hours ago, is all the way up at 69.52. Um, that's pretty far away. Probably I'm not going to be marking that level as any like rejection potential just because we're 60 points away from it currently. So, not seeing any clarity on the 20 by 15 either, but it is kind of nice to see that revision back towards pivot, but still be continuing the long wave because that means on the smaller time frames, we do technically have room to the upside here. But again, right, there could be some pretty decent movement upside because even on the 20 wave, there's not that many resistive clusters that we're looking at here. So, um, I'm a little ambivalent right now based on what we've currently looked at to see where our opportunity kind of lies. Okay, 10 wave 15. Let me zoom this out just a bit. So we have a few more open states on the 10 wave 15, and that's probably right. It's due to the fact that we've been ranging for the past 7, 8 hours. And so what we can see here is we're still above pivot on the 10 wave 15. We are still above vector. Kind of hard to see, but vector is basically right at pivot right now at 68.91. We did have that revision and break below pivot very briefly. Created a double bottom here at 68.77, which is kind of cool to see. Might be watching that for some potential rejection. But we are currently supportive above vector and above pivot. So that means we want to be looking for upside rejections here, or of course, using our vector as support for a potential bounce for continuation up. We do have an open state at 69.10, and then we have a 20% odds at 69.26 and a 10% odds at 69.28. And you can kind of see it. It's actually really hard to see. 69.28.37, there is an open state. And that's the open state that we created here yesterday afternoon. What is that? That's at 69.28. So that's still pretty high up there, actually. There could be potential here at 69.10. The one reason I'm not really excited about this 6910 open state though is because it's the only one we've seen so far. Like we haven't really seen any opportunity in this area on the 20 wave, on the 7 wave 60. And so to just kind of have one time frame showing an open state at 6910 doesn't give me a huge amount of confidence. So we'll still see if the 7 wave 5 minute and the 50 wave one has something up there, but I'm definitely not going to be just like looking at a rejection at 6910 just because one time frame is showing it. So not to mention 6910 on this chart alone is only just a little bit past the 50% odds. And so when you look at this from a probability perspective of continuation, 50%, like in my opinion, is not great odds, right? I really like seeing those open states paired with like the 10% odds, the 20% odds, because that then does give us a little bit of extension. I would say the 50% is like not, you know, great odds for rejection for my strategy at least. Okay, so let's go look at the 7-way 5. Okay, so the 7-way 5, I think is the first time frame we've seen that is actually below pivot. Let's see if price is trading below Victor. See if we can zoom in enough to find that. Okay, so price is technically, where are we at here? Okay, we're trading at 68.96. Okay, so price is still technically trading above Vector on the 7-way 5 minute, but we're just below pivot, which is interesting. Um, In terms of potential rejection spaces to the upside, we do see now, right, the 69.11.52 is an open state that we created a long time ago. Let's go see where we created that. We created that back here. No, wasn't that far back. Back yesterday. Um, Yesterday evening actually was when we created this one that's now posting at 69.11. That's giving us a 10% odds of continuation at 69.12 as well. So we could probably argue that we're starting to build a very weak gray box from 69.11 and a half to 69.15, just because that 10 wave 15 minute had something there. Um, so we'll see. I'm not super pleased with it though, considering it's only two time frames at this point. If the 50 wave 1 minute has something, we could potentially look at that. But otherwise, past this 69.11, we have a decent amount of open space all the way up to 69.32. And then that even farther all the way up to 45. So again, looking at these black clusters on the side, there's a decent potential for upside here. One of the things that we can look at too on this chart is we're trading above vector, but because we're below pivot, we could look down to 68.85 for a potential bounce area because we do have this double bottom marked here. We've closed pretty much all of our open states to the downside, so the only one that is posting right now is this one at 68.85 that's just past our 10% odds. So there's maybe some potential down there for a bounce if we were to break below vector and kind of have a move down. But I don't really want to be looking at bounces on our other time frames because we're trading above pivot. So whenever we start to remember like make a change over from a short wave to a long wave, we tend to see our values revise in regards to like open states and odds. And so, one of the things that I want to caution you guys on is just because we're seeing a little bit of inconsistencies between what is above and what is below pivot. If we do get revisions, back above or below, just highly recommend rechecking your charts to make sure nothing has changed significantly. Because that does happen sometimes. Sometimes it changes, just not a lot. But if you're looking like if you're seeing significant changes, that's a big signal for me to go, okay, I want to be hands off here because something has changed in the volatility measurements that like has totally changed up our numbers and really have to reevaluate what those areas are. So 85 to the downside here, 11 to 15 to the top side is what we're seeing on the 7-way 5. Let's go look at our smaller time frame. I'm not liking anything so far. Oh my goodness. I'm really not liking anything so far. Look at this 50 wave 1 minute. Ooh, look at this. All right, there's a couple things I don't like about this chart. Okay, let's complain about this chart together. First off, we were hoping to have some type of a gray box between 69.11 and 69.15, and I was kind of expecting the 50 wave 1 minute to have some sort of confluence in that area. But look, 6905, basically 6906 is our open state and 5% odds. But look at that blank space on the 50 wave 1 all the way up to 2% odds at 6931. It's like 30 points of space on the 50 wave 1 minute, which is actually a lot. Um, that's the first thing I don't like about this chart is that we don't really have a clean gray box set up to the top side. And then the second thing I don't love about this chart is look at how flat our vector's been. Let's go back. So this was a couple hours ago. Oh, maybe even like just an hour ago. So we had our pivot at 68.88, 68.89, 68.90, 93, 94, 95. Okay, so pivot's been 68.95 for quite a while, 68.96 in this area. Um, that means that pivot's been acting as an anchor on these really small time frames. The other thing that I don't love about this is that pivot was relatively respected. Sorry, vector was relatively respected this morning, but now we're starting to see this break above, break below, break above, break below on the 50 wave 1 minute, which means that price right now, where we're currently sitting at this like 68.95, 68.96 area, is very ambivalent. Doesn't really know if it wants to continue up, doesn't really know if it wants to break back down. So seeing this level of ambivalence on the 50 wave 1 minute doesn't really give me a huge amount of confidence for taking any type of vector play at this point. Um, because right, as you can kind of see, like even on this really big shortwave we created, we saw a couple of attempts at breaking above and a couple candle closures, but for the vast majority of the time, our candle bodies stood below vector, all on this shortwave until we had that really strong breakup and that revision back above our pivot at the 68.8750. So I actually don't really love that we saw this really extended move past vector, had a little bit of support here, but we're starting to see vector get a little bit disrespected when it comes to where our candle bodies are and like the fact that we have not had a trend on our 50 wave 1 minute. So I don't know, guys. Like, I'm probably not even going to be marking a gray box for a rejection today. I was kind of expecting us to do 11 to 15, but we're only seeing that on two time frames, and that doesn't give me confidence for an A plus setup. Like, one of my things in my trading strategy, and let me actually, I'll pull up my trading strategy for you guys since we're not really having like too many great levels today. I want to show you guys how I have my trading plan because um one of the things is like if I'm not following my trading plan, then like why am I even trading, right? Like let me grab it real quick. Let me grab it. Maybe if I can find it. I got my downloads here. Trading plan. Here it is. I'll give you guys a little bit of sauce. So let's just look at my trading plan real quick. In case you guys have not figured out, right? My two big strategies are trading what I call vector cluster and trading what I call our low probability zones, or if you guys follow A-Train, he calls it gray box, right? So what we were doing this morning is looking for those open states and those low percentage probabilities of continuation. And one of the big things that I look for in my very first confluence is, are there at least three areas of low probabilities of continuation on timeframes and two open states? And so we technically had the two open states. The low probabilities of continuation didn't really look that good. And so like honestly too, like part of me wants to kind of change this confluence of open states because like what I have found is at least two is like my lowest quality criteria. I think I would actually prefer for there to be at least three. So, but anyway, there's like I want three areas of low probabilities, at least 2 to 3 areas of open states. And then obviously look at Milk's yellow box chart for any sort of additional confluences as well. And then the other thing I do like at Market Open is looking at our OMM data to understand where our ceiling and floor is. And so we obviously look at that when we get into New York Session Open, these kind of like other two confluences. But the fact that we only saw two open states um, doesn't really make me super happy with this. But you can kind of see, right, like trade entry is like an initial reject of that earlier zone. And then any invalidation is a 5 minute break and hold through it, as long as that zone is like within a 4 to 6 point range. So that was kind of what we were looking for today from a training plan perspective, was like, could we get that low probability zone set up? I'm not seeing one that I like, especially because we have a lot of room to the top side. Um, like above those zones that we were looking at, that could give us a lot of potential float. So like I feel like my bias today a little bit is bullish, but the fact that we were sitting at a lot of those 20% odds would justify a little bit more of a bearish start to the day to get us back towards equilibrium, reset some of those waves to kind of get closer to pivot for another measured move up. But don't really like that. The other big trading setup that I do have is vector cluster, which we talk about that really regularly too, right? So like, are my vectors grouped closer than 6 points across my time frames? Is my DOM showing strength or weakness? Are there any areas of low probability on low time frames that were kind of overlaid with to kind of like potentially invalidate that trade, right? So like with vector, we obviously don't want to be too high or too low if we're looking at a bounce for continuation. And then we always like looking to obviously check Milk's yellow box chart to see if there's any sort of confluences there as well. So those are kind of my two big strategies. I do like having this. I keep this up usually every day just to make sure that I'm like checking my box when I'm doing my trade entries, because you guys know I'm a pretty picky trader. Um, and also not to mention too, like, right, my risk to reward per trade, I would prefer it to be greater than 2R. Um, so yeah, like based on my trading plan, I'm not really seeing anything too good. I think we could probably consider um this like 69.11 to 69.15 area as okay. Right? We've got that 13 at the 50% odds, which I don't love. Um 10 wave, we've got this 69.10 open state past the 50% odds, which again I don't love, right? I would prefer that to be just a little bit higher. Um on the 7 wave 5 minute, we had that 69.11 and 69.12 at 10%, which I do like, right? Like that's one of the confluences that I would say like, yes, check, that matches my strategy. And then the 50 wave 1 minute, don't really like it, right? Because we don't have the confluence there. We don't have that 10 to 15 area showing density. So um, I think that 10 to 15 area would be a low probability setup. Probably not something that I'm going to be blindly taking. I think as we enter New York session, I will be observing it. The other thing that I'm not going to be blindly taking is any sort of vector bounces and rejects today, because we're seeing ambivalence in vector on our really low time frames, and we're seeing a little bit of inconsistency across like if vector is above or below pivot on some of our time frames. And so what I really want to do is be patient and wait to see a trend form and some type of consistency form on vector across our multiple time frames. So this is a super weird warning, guys, because I am genuinely not going to be marking any zones. I think if you guys want, you can mark this 10 to 15 area, but like I'm not even going to mark it because we have two like okay confluences. This is not something that I'm going to be like mechanically trading. I think I'm going to be watching price action a little bit more, looking at a lot of our market generated information, seeing what our OMM data shows in regards to our ceiling and our floor, and kind of how our DOM trades, just to understand if we're going to see, bullish continuation or potentially range more, or kind of get us back towards that yellow box. So I don't know, guys. This was a pretty disappointing charting session for me. I was hoping we could get some clarity, but I do not see clarity. So, of course, I will be trading this morning in Ascend with our group to kind of see if we could find some clarity as market opens. But in regards to obvious levels today, I'm just don't really have the sauce for you guys. So, let me know if you guys ended up taking that 32 to 29 bounce yesterday, because that played really, really well. But hey, sometimes you go fishing every day and you don't catch a big one. So, we will see. Oh, I know. You're looking at the spooky tape, right? We'll see. Shenanigans may ensue today, guys. Well, I will be here tomorrow to do some setup. Hopefully we'll find something beautiful tomorrow, but hey, we can't catch a fish every day, right? All right, guys. I will talk to y'all in Ascend here pretty soon. I'm gonna go grab some breakfast and get ready for a New York session. See you guys.